Hello, Eddie.
Good afternoon, Alex. It's wonderful to connect with you again on our journey through consciousness. We covered some pretty rough terrain, but we had excellent shock absorbers and we made a lot of progress, I think. I mean, the rough terrain was negotiating our passage through what the mainstream scientists put up as roadblocks in our way. And um, first, we talked about the benefits of science and its limitations, and then we saw a gateway through materialism and talked about William James and his wonderful ideas on consciousness and the mind, not just as a productive function, but permissive and filtering. And I would just say, if any scientist would challenge us and say, well, how do you prove, demonstrate that the mind is a filter of consciousness? I would turn it around and say, you scientists are spending millions, literally, trying to discover how the brain produces consciousness. First, you prove that to us. Then we'll tell you that the mind is a filter. It doesn't produce.
Yes, I've had this idea, which is a bit of a cheeky one in that respect, which is, these prizes or these initiatives for people like you and I to submit ideas,
Yes.
experimental programs, and so on,
Mm.
to demonstrate or to provide evidence that the mind goes beyond the brain. Well, I
Mm.
thought it would be interesting to phrase it the other way around. Just give a prize to those
Mm.
who can provide evidence, demonstrate that the mind lives in house arrest inside the skull. And then they will be like, okay, let's turn the game upside down. And now you show us your best guess at it. And it will be then perhaps more revealing instead of all the time we trying to defend, demonstrate, carry all the burden of proof, which we should say, okay, but please, now you do the same because it's equally unclear from your side that it's so obvious. So what will be your? No, don't take it for granted and ask me. Well, let's do both. Now you tell me your best reasons why you're so sure that your data shows that minds are inside the skull.
And also show us your assumptions and your presuppositions, which
Yes,
are nothing more than presuppositions in many cases. Yeah.
yes.
So there we are.
But today we're covering chapters 7 and 8.
Absolutely, yes.
And well, I felt we got into a landscape that I'm not familiar with. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm super grateful and excited because as I was reading these chapters, 7 and 8, well, all these concepts that help me map the terrain and gain, basically, you were educating me as to, well, what this business of the, as I say, of the mystery teaching is about, and having this general overview
Mm-hmm.
for what's going to come, which will be more detailed, is so useful. It was so useful to me, and I think can be useful to the people who may listen to us.
Yes, sure. So
Should we
you want me
go?
to?
Yeah.
Yes. Right. You want me to start on what the mystery teachings are?
Well, I have a list of
Sure.
topics and questions, and we
You
can.
go. You go ahead.
All
Yeah.
right.
By
All
all
right.
means. Yeah.
So let's start with the difference between initiates and adepts, and the question of initiation.
Yes. Well, thank you for a relatively easy question to start with. Relatively, the initiate is a student, and we're all students, of worthy character and disposition and qualification, who qualifies to receive instruction that would not be given to someone who is unqualified. But that would apply in any walk of life. In a university, you can say, using this example, an initiate is someone who's passed the exam and is worthy to have instruction imparted, except that here the instruction that's imparted is the secret of the universe, the secret workings of nature. And then when the initiate has passed that phase, he goes on to the next. And the ultimate flowering of that instruction is the adept. So an initiant is someone who is being prepared for instruction. The initiate is someone who's been given that instruction, when taken to its culmination is an adept, or the Indian word, the Mahatma. And the adept is one, man or woman, of course, he meaning man or woman, who has so perfected his physical, intellectual, mental, and spiritual faculties to the extent to which humanity in our phase is capable of doing.
Wonderful. So let's say something more about worthy of character, right? Because this is not just as what you will put in your CV to get accepted in a university, or your programming skills, or your... what's this view of worthy of character?
Worthy of character is so important because nature's secrets imparted to the wrong people in the unworthy hands are highly dangerous. So the most important quality of character is absolute purity of motive, such that whatever you're given, you will not abuse. Now, just take the current world situation, for goodness sake. We had the secrets of splitting the atom. We've just about managed not to blow ourselves up. Now, just imagine what would happen if further secrets were imparted, and the mystery teachings, I'm just going to call it that, tell us that the further secrets would make nuclear power like playthings in the hands of those who wield it. And there are many allegorical and mythological and stories about that. We won't go into that now. So the first qualification is absolute purity of motive. Then there has to be obviously physical health, and then intellectual capability to distinguish the true from the false.
All right. Today I have so many questions, so I just shoot them.
And for that reason, the candidate for the mystery teachings is subjected to the most severe punishing tests, to test his character, to test his courage, to test his motives.
This reminds me of what's called I'm translating from Spanish, but the shaman's wound. Is it related? The idea that if you endure in that path, it's not going to be easy. And actually, at the end of chapter 7, when you speak about the emissaries of the mystery schools, well, the list of celebrated emissaries is grandiose, and what happened to them, except the Buddha, actually.
Except the Buddha, who had a relatively easy time.
So that's what you mean, that this path, because of some, we may say, occult or esoteric reason of light and darkness, is really heavy.
You can say heavy, but there is nothing in the literature, in history, in the mystery teachings, that anyone who is endowed with divinity, spirituality, there's nothing to say that his personal life will not be full of strains and suffering. And this is the whole esoteric hidden meaning behind the crucifixion. It's not just nailing someone on a cross. It's the sacrifice of the lower self so that the higher self may have a voice.
Yeah.
So whether besides the Buddha, I mean, there's a whole long list. Zarathustra, as legend has it, assassinated. The Christ, of course, the historical Christ, crucified. Al-Hallaj, gibbeted and burned. The Muhammad's flight from Mecca to Medina. And why is this? Always there's one reason. Because these masters, these adepts, these Mahatmas gave us a living teaching, free from the encrustations of dogma and the church. And by the church, for goodness sake, I don't mean the Christian church only. I mean the church, the monk, the synagogue, the mosque, any system that congeals the living truth. But the keepers, the gatekeepers of the living, of the tombs, of the gatekeepers of dogma, couldn't stand this, of course. So they would try and destroy any emissary of truth. But they had yet to realize that by killing, mutilating, burning an emissary, a master of truth, you do not destroy the truth. The truth is above and beyond any of its masters. The truth will always live. So never think that by killing someone, you're going to destroy the truth. No, you won't. The truth will always find a new master.
You see, this music already sounds different than what I'm used to, at least, because we've heard purity and sacrifice so far. Let me ask you two more questions related to the initiation. One is, if it's so secret, and we'll go back later. We'll come back to go back to the hidden, secret, concealed. If it's so secret and this purity of motive is necessary, well, here you've written 4 volumes that anybody could go and say, okay, let's see it. Okay, chapter 7 or chapter 8, as we'll discuss today too, the 3 actions, the 7 principles, and so on. It's hidden, but it's not. So why did you write it in a book, and how it is at the same time concealed from those who may want to use it?
Right. At one time, of course, the secrets were divulged only in the temples, in the rock temples, in the caves. But now it's a semi-secret. Nothing in those volumes tells you how to do it. Not at all. There's a lot that tells you what can be done and the qualifications for doing it. But the final secret, so to speak, can never be written down or divulged. Not that I even know it, to be honest. But it is pointing the way to that which can indeed be understood if one qualifies for it. So there is a beautiful saying that the occult philosophy, and I must now explain that word, but the secret sciences, it divulges its most important secrets and vital mysteries, dropping them like pearls, very few and far between. And it only does that when the evolutionary tide of humanity demands that this be done. And I'll explain why. But when those pearls fall into unworthy hands, what is a blessing can often become a curse. And that's the old saying of pearls before swine. Now, why were these secrets given out in a guarded form, especially by the modern Theosophical Society? At the time they were. I said when the evolutionary wave of humanity demands that it be done. The 19th century was an explosion of scientific materialism and scientific triumph. There is a lovely saying by one of the adepts, one of the masters, that between religious superstition and even more brutal scientific materialism, the white dove of truth knows not where to place his unwelcome weary foot. So the reason why a lot of those hitherto closeted fact secrets were given out then more openly was to show that there is a path between religious superstition and brutal materialism. Now, a lot of those secrets are veiled, and hence the charge of sort of, woolly this and woolly that. It's not woolly at all. It's only woolly to those who don't have the key.
Now, who has the key? Because the second naive question, and I put it like that, I don't mind, because you'll for sure correct it and uplift it, is, let's say, I wanna I wanna go to the mystery teaching school. Well, where is it? Where is it? Where are those teachers? I mean, of course, this is taking it literally, but if somebody feels this call, where are the teachers? Where are the schools? It all seems so in the air. Even the notion of temple, as you write down, the temple as one's body, not a physical building.
Well, at one time, the mystery schools the world over, there were the Brahmanical schools of India, in ancient Persia, the Egyptian schools, the Druidic schools, the Odinic schools in Scandinavia. Nowadays, if someone says, where can I find a mystery school? I will say, I have no idea, because you have to deserve being invited to a mystery school, so to speak. And the mystery school doesn't have to be a place or a temple now. It can be a teaching. It can be an experience. It can be a unique friendship. But the next step, of course, is the path of yoga, the path of mysticism, which you are drawn to as you advance on your own path. So it's not helpful ever to think, where can I find a mystery school? It's better to think, let me understand these teachings, and then I'll be drawn to a particular center of learning. Again, from one of the wonderful adepts, there's a letter that says, nature has linked all parts of our empire with subtle threads of magnetic sympathy. And there is even a correlation between a star and a man. Then he goes on to say, my brother, every pure thought and pure impulse in your mind will sparkle and attract the attention of your distant master. And even though we move in worlds different from you, it is our law to seek out such a person who is sincere in their understanding and in their action. So the popular saying, you take one step towards God, God takes 9 steps towards you. It is a law that the masters will seek out a pupil who will fulfill the higher purpose. And that contact is very rarely physical contact. It can be by this subject, which is of great interest now, synchronicity. For some reason, you find the right book. You go into a library, thousands of books, you pick the one book that can change your life.
Yeah.
You meet the right person. You have just the right experience. So the master can work in that way. Not necessarily by, hello, what's your name? Who are you? No, it's never like that.
Yeah. Early in this chapter, you address the charge of superstition, medieval superstition. I was thinking that those who follow us so far, we may have recorded at least 4 hours or more. If they're still here with us, it's because they're into this. But still, there's something also in me, I must confess, that says, esotericism, which we'll define in a moment. And that sounds like the usual esoteric, not only medieval, but current esotericism. I had another view. So how to dispel this charge of superstition?
How do you dispel the charge of superstition? By pointing out a few features that are central in all the teachings. One is their universality. So whether you look to the Buddha, to Zarathustra, to the Christ in ancient times, or to Peter Dunov, David Lorimer has spoken very eloquently, or to Ramana Maharshi, or to Sri Aurobindo, you see a universal message in different language. As we were saying a few sessions ago, the message is eternal. The ink is one, but they write in their different handwritings.
Mm.
So the universality of the message is one. Then you see concordance, which is a similarity and a resonance of meaning. And if anyone says, oh, it's superstition, I would say, have the courage, have the guts to read the huge writings of Sir Isaac Newton, let alone his theology, let alone his alchemy. Just read the General Scholium in Principia. And there he provides at least 10 references to show the universality of the divine principle. So concordance is one. Another one, another approach is what E.O. Wilson called consilience, that is semi-independent bits of evidence, but when you put them together, they build up to a large body of independence. So if you look at the philosophy, religion, sciences of all the great nations, and you put them together, you find that they point and emanate from one source. So superstition, of course, is the overlay that we put on what is true. So in very crude terms, superstition is like the rust on pure metal.
Mm-hmm.
You would not have rust if you didn't have pure metal.
Mm-hmm.
Could you possibly have rust on its own? No. You've got to have metal first.
Yes.
Superstition is if you put a wooden pole in a river, it's the barnacles and the stuff that sticks to the pure wood.
And I was thinking it perhaps has a function, because even talking superstitiously about esotericism, at least is a way that people like me can hear about it and know that these things exist. And then maybe later on, maybe 20 years later, comes across a book like yours and becomes more interested into these matters. But they've been out there just so superficially, but you may suspect there's something else underneath the rust.
Yeah, and another way of is it just superstition? Look to the great writers, Dr. Radhakrishna, first Spalding Professor of Philosophy at Oxford, then Vice President, then President of India. In his great book on Eastern and Western religions, he mentions how the wonderful religion from the East has seeded fecundae to fertilize the Western religions, and how this path can be traced. And my favorite example is the great Pythagoras, who suffered such a cruel death, of course, like all the great masters, or most of them. When he traveled through Persia and Iran, he was a pupil of the initiated Brahmins in the Elephanta and Ellora caves. And in the Brahmanical records, there is still a reference to Pythagoras as Yavanacharya, the Ionian teacher. And Charya means truth, of course. So you see this fertilization and this dissemination of eternal verities, which, like a stream, the more the stream runs downhill, the more it picks up the soil and the sediment and the rocks, which we can call pollution and superstition. But if we take it back to source, then we see the purity of the originating impulse.
So how fertile is the ground today for the mystery teachings?
Oh my goodness, that's a very good question. In one sense, the ground is always fertile, never more fertile than now because it's needed so badly.
Mm.
And I would say, despite all the horror we see, there are certainly not just pockets, but large pools and oceans of tremendous goodwill.
And where are the teachers? Because there was the age of Christ, or when Sri Aurobindo and the
The
mother were
teachers,
alive. Where are they?
the teachers are more, I suppose, in the modern way. The teaching is divulged through seminars, through webinars,
Hmm.
through the Scientific Medical Network, through the Theosophical Society, and through people who, I wouldn't say who claim to be teachers, but anyone who claims to be a guru, I'd say run a mile.
Yeah. Okay. A good moment, perhaps, to make the distinction between esotericism and
Yes, most
occultism, which is
certainly. Yeah.
very important in chapter 7.
It is, yes. So that needs a fair bit of explanation. Let's
Yeah.
just start with mysticism first, which is that universal feeling of union with nature, especially union with invisible entities in nature. And this obviously encompasses innumerable shades from vague intimations to actual feeling of contact with nature. And the other word, of course, is henosis, without introducing too many words. Henosis meaning union with the one and all. Now, regarding mysticism, Rene Weber, the professor of philosophy at Rutgers University, said something that should make us open our eyes and drop our jaws. It is mysticism that pursues the grand universal theory with ruthless logic. Why? Because the mystic leaves nothing out of his considerations, whereas science detaches himself from the universe. Except that now in quantum physics, we've realized that the scientist, the participator, and the participation are part of one. But that feeling has not pervaded mainstream science, so mysticism pursues the grand universal theory. But now, esotericism, if I'm a mystic, I have this feeling of union with nature, but then I get dissatisfied. I want to know a bit more. I want to understand nature's processes and how nature works. So, esotericism is the study of the invisible influences, the secret knowledge of nature's hidden forces and energies, rather than the exoteric, the outward, which science studies to absolute perfection. But studying just the forces and the secrets is like reading a book on physics or engineering. Then I need to do some engineering. I need to make something. So we come to the occult, that word that is so stupidly misunderstood. Occultism, occult science, is the study and the secret knowledge of nature's forces and energies and how they can be controlled and manipulated. So, using a musical example, and examples without taking them to extremes are always useful. If I love music, love all music, I'm a mystic. But if I want to understand musical theory and play an instrument, I've got to learn theory of music and all that. But then I'm an esotericist. But then if I want to perform as an international concert pianist, I'm an occultist. So the esoteric is to do with the system. Occultism is to do with function. You can't function until you know the system. The word occult just comes from the root obsolere. Obsolere. So it derives from that compound term, which is related to the English word conceal. So anything that is hidden is concealed, is occult. So occult science is the study of the hidden laws of nature that lie at the root of all existence and pertain to the unseen and higher realms of existence that constitute, the higher realms constitute the ground of our being. And the reason, as I said earlier, we said earlier, for the secrecy and all of that, is purely so that these things will not be abused and misused, even though they have on certain occasions, of course. But I cannot emphasize too strongly, Àlex, that any force in nature is neutral. Nuclear power is, in that sense, neutral. It's highly potent. There is tremendous potentiality, but it's neutral. It can be used to power electricity. It can be used to make bombs. Biochemistry. We don't say biochemistry is a load of rubbish because of the dreadful thalidomide disaster. We don't blame science, chemistry, and say, oh, look what science did, we got bombs. And think of human sexuality. I mean, look, just think of it. Think of the ghastliness and the filth and the pedophiles and all that. That doesn't make human sexuality a cruel, impure act. It's what one does with it. Human sexuality is a force in nature. Is it not? Gravity is a force in nature. You can use it or abuse it. Similarly, it's no big deal that occult science is kept secret for that reason, and that's all. So all this rubbish we hear about witchcraft and voodoo and all of that is a misunderstanding that any force can be abused. That's all.
And so black magic is real. It happens.
Yes, absolutely. It does. It is an abuse of nature's secrets. And the black magician will pay a dreadful price. White magic is the altruistic use. That's it.
Back to the hidden aspect. I think it was Heraclitus, right, who said nature loves to hide, and that's a fascinating book by it's called The Veil of Isis by Pierre Hedot. Well, anyways, he unfolds this idea of nature, and so I see here maybe the coincidence of two hidings. One will be, and for the natural scientists as well, that the whole, we read it in Galileo and we read it in Francis Bacon and we read it in many others. It's like, well, nature has some secrets. We want to know what they are. And then there's the whole methodology as to how you extract them in a more friendly or less friendly way. So on the one hand, nature has some secrets, but also the mystery teachings are secret for these reasons you're saying.
Exactly so, yes. But most importantly, the mystery teachings, their central purpose is to evolve a method whereby the mind is so trained that it can cope with any emergency that can arise. So the central purpose of the mystery teachings is to evolve this method of quickening one's personal evolution. So if I can use a very, very simple example, we're not saying the mystery teachings have a formula for all the ills and diseases and troubles of our age, but like an algebraic formula, if you understand the formula, you can apply it intelligently where, in its rightful context. So if you are an expert motorist, you can't be expected to know every pothole, every traffic light, every accident on your journey. But by virtue of your expert driving skills, you can negotiate these difficulties and get where you want. Similarly, the mystery teachings cannot provide a solution for every problem of every age. But like the expert motorist, by evolving a culture of the mind, we can intelligently negotiate these problems, because where reason exists, stupidity has no place. And hence the aphorism, the mystery teachings turn roaring beasts into divinities for that reason. So the animal nature is refined so that we can cooperate with nature in her fullness.
Yeah, thank you for reminding us the what for of the mystery teachings. Otherwise, it may sound like curiosity because we want to know more about how nature works and use it. But to have it said so clearly that it is acceleration of evolution at a personal level. All right. Okay, that's so much to cover for chapter 8. And there's where you start to articulate what occult science affirms. So the first point to make there, which you make it already in the title, is this is what occult science affirms in contrast with natural sciences. So you use this word contrast, complementary, and I wonder if that's being generous or there's also something to refute or maybe contradict. Why not?
Well, it's a compliment because science works according to the inductive principle, the Aristotelian, going from the particular to the general, as indeed it should do. But the senses are physical senses, and the discoveries are like extensions of the physical senses. So microscopes and telescopes are like extensions of the physical senses. And the process is bottom up. But the occult teachings work according to always the Hermetic principle of top down. That's the Platonic deductive method. So here we're not so much as trying to extend the physical senses, but we are transcending the physical senses such that we can see that which lies beyond the physical senses.
Yes. So in terms of method...
So the two methods are entirely, the two approaches are entirely complementary.
Yes. Yes, in terms of method, certainly. I was perhaps asking us in terms of content, but maybe that's just jumping ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Like, could one use occult science to refute, correct something from natural science, and also the other way around?
Sorry, I'm not quite clear.
Yes, in this contrast, this complementarity you express about the both methods, right? Both approaches.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes.
I mean, to create some helpful friction, right? Like, well, this says A, but this says something different. So how do we, another way to phrase the question would be, how do we resolve when there's not just contrast or complementary, but contradiction?
When there's contradiction, I always like to look at the context in which something is stated. If we're talking about the physical sciences, then it's a waste of time trying to invoke occult science or something that's purely, to do the physical plane. But where there's a contradiction, it can be sometimes a question of appearances rather than the actual truth of the matter. Einstein put it beautifully that if I can just recall, what he said is science tells us the truth, but not the whole truth. Now, when we speak of the truth, we can talk about how things appear to us. But then Einstein said the whole truth is only known to the universal observer. What he's alluding to, the universal observer, to see things from all angles and not just the one angle. So what is apparently true is known to the physical sciences. What is really, really true goes beyond that.
Yeah, I see. Good. Let's start unfolding, and we could not do it in detail or in depth, maybe a little bit. But again, this is an appeal for the reader to go and just actually read the chapter. Let's unfold the 3 axioms of occult science, because here's where we start seeing kind of a more explicit formulation.
Yeah, the 3 axioms, regard the 3 axioms as the bud from which the 7 petals of the flower will unfold. The first axiom, known as the first sort of fundamental principle, if you like, the first axiom is a boundless, immutable principle which cannot be approached by thought, but which can be sensed within ourselves. So that really is the fundamental unity of all existence. But the more you try and grapple at it with the intellectual mind, the more problems you will face. Not that you shouldn't use your mind as stepping stones. The second one is what we see all around us, periodicity, the cycles of nature, the cycles within the human being, the ebb and flow of the tides, the cycles, the seasons all around us. Even though we mess around with climate, we can still sense seasons in nature. The third one I've called reunification, for want of a better word. It means that every spark, every particle, every creature wants to attain union with its originating source. So if all of us are like sparks, we want to move towards the flame from which we were emanated. And there is that beautiful saying by Rumi, the Sufi, that I slept in the stone, I stirred in the vegetable, I dreamt in the animal, and I woke up in the man. This is all saying that nature shows a march, an evolutionary march, whereby every creature wants to ascend towards reunification with its source.
These 3 axioms have some sort of dialectical structure, right? Like there's unity, right, and then there'll be some change within this recurrence, but in order not to be trapped, there's a return. I like that all these, especially the 3rd axiom, has these words associated with right? Realize, reclaim, return.
And it's 3, as we were saying last time. It's always 3.
So it's a journey. It seems like then the cosmic adventure is a journey.
Sure. And one can unpack the 3 into the 7. I mean, mathematically, 7 comes from the 3, 2 squared minus 1.
So let's do it. Okay, let's go from the 3 to the 7.
Well, if we do. So the first petal is the supreme deity, or the infinite essence, if you like, which pervades everything, all and everything. The second one is what's known as the hylozoic principle. It's just saying that there's no such thing in the universe as dead matter. Everything has life at its own level. And even Newton, in his alchemical writings, said a stone has soul and spirit. So there is no such thing as dead matter. In Rumi's lovely saying, I slept in the stone, but I have life. The third one is that mankind, that is a radiation, so to speak, of the universal soul, of the universal oversoul, and therefore he is immortal in essence. Then the fourth one, it all follows one from the other, is the tremendous Hermetic axiom. The popular saying, as above, so below, tells us very little. It is really establishing the relationship between the macrocosm, the universe at large, and the microcosm, its reflection, man, and nature. So the principle of analogy and correspondence is central to occult study and application. And then using that principle of as above, so below, the next one is theurgy, which is known as practical magic, but it's not magic at all. It's applying the laws of nature, but it's magic because from our point of view, they are invisible and hidden. Where are we? Yes, the sixth one is karma, the universal law. It's not punishment, it's recompense, it's adjustment, constantly in operation. And the final one is evolution, which proceeds on three fronts: the spiritual, the intellectual, and the physical. I mean, there is a wonderful mathematics. I said 2 squared minus 1, that's the triplicity. But if you start from the 3, you get the 7 by combining it. So if you have ABC, let's put it that way, you have AB, AC, AD, ABC, CD, AB, so you get it that way.
Yeah. Combinatorics, yes, by combinatorics. Yes. Oh, I was going to mention that you went through these 7 principles so quickly. I'd like to maybe ask you a few things about some of them, and they're. So, for instance, we could start with the third, when you just mentioned immortality of man. Does this apply to other beings? Is this immortality is coming from the source?
That's a good one. The immortality, yes and no, in the sense that if we take the animal kingdom, the animal kingdoms have, the old word is the group soul, the modern term is the morphogenetic field. So man is unique in the sense that he is this mortal spark in a mortal body. So the mortal vesture is certainly not immortal. The mortal vesture is mortal, but the divine spark is immortal in the sense that it seeks new vestures in order to continue its evolutionary journey. So immortality applies in the realm of time. It is not the same as eternity. It is still in the realm of time, but in huge expanses of time, of course.
Yeah. Well, these get into very complex issues. It just reminded me a book that published David J. Griffin before passing away, and there he argues that only the soul, the human soul, is immortal. So that would mean that our pets, for instance, don't make it to the afterlife, which can be inconvenient to some people because we all have our beliefs. But perhaps it's a very technical, theological / metaphysical question. But since you mentioned immortality, I wondered what things entities can enjoy it.
Yeah. In volume 2, we can explore that the animal kingdom has the spiritual soul as a potentiality, but it hasn't been individualized as in the human being.
All right. Okay. Now, if we move to the fourth principle, the Hermetic principle, to which you devote a few pages.
Yes, that's very important.
Yes. Perhaps you could explain a bit more what a microcosm, macrocosm. There's always this mirroring, but micro and macro, at least borrowed from physics, may seem to imply the actually physically small and physically big. But what's implied here by macro and microcosm?
The macrocosm is really a sort of a manifestation of life, of any kind of evolving entity or structure, which displays life and consciousness according to the laws that govern its being. And a microcosm is a subset of that. But the animating principle is in an relatively undeveloped state. So it contains in potentiality all the powers and capacities that can be evolved in the macrocosm. So the acorn and the oak are very good examples, the embryo and the future man. So they are entirely relative terms.
You even use the idea of a fractal and a hologram.
Right? The fractal and holograms are useful analogies because a hologram, the more you cut it down, the more the whole picture is blurred, but it's still, you still see the whole picture, but it's more blurred.
Yes. And also now, seems like we don't have a lot of time, so that's why I'm jumping. But of course, these would deserve a great deal of consideration. The seventh one about evolution, you say something more about it, and I'm very intrigued because it reminds me of some of the ideas of Sri Aurobindo, right? Like that there's not just evolution, there's prior to it, there's involution. And then you add here devolution, which I hadn't heard. But explain these three notions of evolution, because most scientifically minded people have only heard evolution.
Evolution, yeah. Well, if we regard involution as the folding in, so spirit and matter are really a continuum. So involution is the concretion, so to speak, of spirit, the densification of spirit into what we call materiality, which is a very necessary phase in, I was going to say a necessary phase in evolution, but that is a necessary phase in our growth, in the progress of the planet and human beings, let's say. Evolution is the boiling out, so to speak, the release of spirit from its confines of matter, evolvere, to turn outwards as opposed to turn inwards. Devolution is the stepping down from one level to another level. So the so-called fall into matter is a devolution from which there can be a subsequent redemption to reascend to the source.
Yeah.
So evolution is something that's gone into in great depth and detail in the occult philosophy. And there can be a lot of misunderstandings connected with it, of course.
Yes, and I can see how this is a part of the petals of the three axioms, right? Because we have unity, but then we have this periodicity. This reminds me of Bohm's implicate and explicate order, but then there's reunification. So there is a falling backwards and falling inwards. Okay, well, I don't know if we should go over the 6 characteristics, but maybe we can leave it there because, but they're more than interesting actually, because again, one often doesn't hear those terms used so precisely, right? Correspondence and concordance and so on. So maybe this is an invitation again for the reader. And I'm sure we'll be coming back through the axioms and the principles.
Yeah, definitely.
So we need to study them well and know them well before we move on. So do you have any final reflections, thoughts, comments on these chapters or on what's to come?
Well, we were talking about the secret sciences. Anything that is secret is sacred. And it's only secret in order to preserve the sacredness of it. When you preserve the sacredness, it doesn't need to be secret. It can be entirely open, of course. There's a beautiful saying that wisdom, this higher wisdom, is a flower from which the bee makes its honey and the spider its poison, each according to his nature. So the flower is one, the nectar is one, but the nature of the bee and the nature of the spider are entirely different. So one can make honey, the other one can make poison. So we can work with nature or we can abuse nature.
You have time for a bonus track here. Let me ask you about evil in the world. What's the place of evil in the mystery teachings, in these axioms? Why evil? I mean, of course, that's not an easy question to just casually drop at the very end. But since you mentioned, well, of course, the spider makes what it has to make in order for it to survive, right? But since you made this remark, and given what's going on in the world, it seems to me that I think evil is real to begin with, and I think there's more of it today around.
There seems to be, yeah. There's no denying the fact of evil and what we have around us, but certainly in terms of the Hermetic axiom, there is no fundamental ontological duality between the so-called good and evil. So in a word, the only way one can talk about evil, and there's tremendous more one can say, is anything that is born, say, a fruit on a tree is pure, when it is born and when it lives its life. But if you leave it out, it gets rotten. So even evil is the rotten side of that which was once pure and beautiful. And evil is the shadow side. And it's much more than just the contrast. And it shows the complete misunderstanding that people think they own anything. They own the universe, they own the land, they own someone else, they own someone else's property. It is a perversion.
I appreciate your metaphor of being left aside and then to become rotten. But then why was it left aside? Can we pursue that? What happened for it to be left aside and rotten?
Why was...
Yes. A kind of the genealogy of evil in that sense.
There's a lot in the mystery teachings that, in the Gnostic teachings also, that goes into this whole subject of what went wrong.
Yes.
And
yes.
When mankind was given the gift of mind, he was not told in so many words how to use his mind. He was given the choice of how to use his mind. But this principle, this fact of evil goes back a tremendously long way to prehistoric epochs. And one would have to bring in the prehistory of Atlantis and Lemuria and all those lost continents. So in many ways, what we're seeing now is resurfacing of what went on in those times, which had not been sorted out. So it just, let's put it like this. The great Schiller said, didn't he, that the universe is a thought of deity. And since that thought has overspilled into actuality, it is the task of intelligent men to rediscover the original design. So you might say, was that original thought contained evil? No, not at all. It was potentiality. It was nothing but love. But, and this is the important point, Àlex, that in that overspilling of divine thought, it is an expression of love. Now, love has its laws. If you abuse what you love, you will pay the price. So, what the divine principle enacted over men was laws such that when man looks upon man with hate, he is destroyed by his own iniquities, and that's karma. So there is a law of love. When you transgress that law, that's when you see evil. And then you are destroyed by your own iniquities. There's no God creating evil. So when man looks upon man with hate, just look around now, man, is destroyed by his own iniquities. The great Beethoven quoted Portia from Merchant of Venice, that hate, this is Beethoven quoting Portia, hate only reacts upon those who nourish it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no independent principle of evil. Transgress the law through your own stupidity, greed, selfishness, and then you will see evil.
Thank you, Edi.
So next time, Àlex, we're going to go right into the mystery teachings, and then we'll see a little bit more about why we have not so much created evil, but why we are such narcissistic human beings. Another, quickly, an aspect of evil is we fall in love with our own image. So we think we are the greatest.
Yes.
So the mystery teachings concern the initiates, the adepts of these mystery schools of all ages that form this golden chain of superhumans. And they are the links in that golden chain, that those illustrious founders of science, religion, and philosophy, and the patron of the arts. And our spiritual culture bears witness to their august presence. It is a divine institution in the world of men, and will it always be that.
Wonderful. So next time we'll cover chapter 9 and the rest of volume 1, and we'll have completed our journey through the first volume of Unfolding Consciousness.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex.